House Farm and Garden. I'm here today with our culinary historian, Chef Gregory Funk. And today he's going to show you how to use some honey to make a late summer salad recipe that's inspired by some of our historical recipe books here at WIC. So you want to come in for a second. I've pulled a few items for you to take a look at that tell you a little bit about honey here at WIC. My name's Tess, I'm the Director of Interpretation and Public Outreach, and I'm very excited to have you here today. Let's learn a bit about honey. So now we're inside of WIC Historic House, and for those of you who don't know, WIC is one of the oldest houses located in Germantown, Philadelphia. Settlement here dates to about 1690. And what's special about WIC is that it was home to one family, the Wistars and the Haynes family, from 1690 until the 1970s. So for 9 generations, one family lived here, the house never left their hands, and they had the fortunate quality of being a little bit of hoarders. So we have over 10,000 objects that belonged to them that span a 300-year time span. So in honor of National Honey Month, I've pulled a couple objects that I think are really interesting and that speak to the history of beekeeping and the use of beeswax and honey here at WIC. We're trying to raise a little bit of awareness about the importance of honeybees and as a pollinator, which makes places at WIC like the historic Rose Garden and the Home Farm thrive. So for starters here, I have a historic bee skep, which is a basketry beehive from the early 19th centuries, probably dating to around 1810. And this was brought into the collection by 6th generation resident Reuben Haynes III. And this type of beekeeping went out of fashion when Langstreth, who this book is Langstreth and the Honeybee, basically created a type of hive as we know them today that didn't require the colony to be killed off when extracting the honey and beeswax from the skep. But in using this, a lot of the recipe books that I pulled here would have been using this type of skep here at WIC. And Greg, I know you're going to be cooking us something using some honey, some mead, some raspberry vinegar. All of these are recipes that can be found in our historic recipe book collection here at WIC. So for starters, we have Miss Hannah Marshall Haynes, who was the 5th generation resident who moved out to WIC during the yellow fever to get some fresh air in the countryside here in Germantown. And we have her receipt book here, which has a recipe for my favorite, which is mead. So we're going to be using some of that, which Greg can tell you a little bit about what he's concocting for us in the education building here this afternoon.
It's fun to be inspired by these old receipts, and you will hear me later also bounce back and forth between using the word receipt and recipe. The mead recipe that she's calling for, what's fun there is that it's 12 gallons of water and 20 pounds of honey.
She's making it in bulk. We also have other uses of honey from John Smith Haynes, the grandson of Hannah Marshall. He has a recipe for waterproof composition for boots, in which the main ingredient is yellow beeswax. So thinking of all of the ways in which the honeybee is providing for the Wistar Haynes family. And then last but not least, I have a recipe which appears in all of the receipt books here at WIC. So a very highly used recipe, which is for raspberry vinegar. So Greg's going to be incorporating a lot of these ingredients inspired by these historic recipe books into something fun for you guys to make at home.
Well, hello again, folks. You can barely hear me because I am wearing my mask. If you'll allow me to remove it, we'll get started listening a little easier. Thank you. As we mentioned inside, the WIC collection is huge. 10,000 objects in the house, 100,000 manuscripts, books, on and on and on. So A couple of the things that caught my eye that had to do with Honeyfest are, there were receipts, and I will jump back and forth between using the word receipt and recipe. That's just a time-dated difference in how we look at these culinary crafts. As I mentioned, the things that caught my eye inside, there are recipes for mead, because we did have a brewery on the property as well as downtown at the Big House. Very, very ancient alcoholic beverage. Lots of different taste profiles, whether it was done with, always done with honey, but whether it was yeasted or barleyed or on and on and on. So we'll have a commercial later for where we got this. So I'm including mead. I am poaching pears in the mead. The other ingredients in the salad are some goat cheese that I got from the Amish at Reading Terminal. Black walnuts will be in that salad because we do have a black walnut tree on the property. And we'll be going outside and gathering the green part in the farm and on the lawn. So we're going to start with peeling and poaching the pears. These are Bartlett's. Even overnight they got fairly yellow, so that's good, but we're going to leave them as half of pears. They'll be a lot more forgiving in the poaching liquid. Let me do that and I'll get right back to you. So the magic of editing, I've got the pears cored. I used a little melon baller thing. So I've got them cored and peeled. I'm going to leave them as half pears. They'll be a little more forgiving in the syrup. You could dice them. You're just going to have to watch them more carefully the smaller the dice is. This I'll be able to have a few minutes leeway. And they were fairly firm, but I can smell them, so they're on the way to being ripe. So again, a firm pear, because we're cooking it, will give you a little more time to just play with it and not watch it so close. So we have mead from Colony, I'm being corrected. So I'm going to poach, and I tasted it, of course, a second ago. It's fairly dry. You will find them in different styles. They do one that even has cinnamon in it. This would be fine with cinnamon, with cloves, with a little piece of ginger. Nothing too mysterious here. But what I'm going to flavor it with, and maybe that's a little bit unusual, I'm going to throw in 2 or 3 bay leaves. So that kind of more savory herb in the sweet, I think is kind of fun. So we'll put 2 or 3. These happen to be fresh bay leaves. And I'm actually going to sweeten this a little bit too. So the honey we're using here from the bees on the property is Instar. We will have contact information for you for those as well. So I'm just going to sweeten this a little bit to make more of a syrup. And I'm going to put it on the stove and we're going to poach these. Thanks. As you see, I poached the pears. It took about 6 or 8 minutes. That will vary on how ripe your pears are. I'm going to cool, I've kept them under a little bit, a tiny little bit, because I want to poach them. I want to leave them in the syrup overnight. So include that in your timing and in your doneness. They're firm, but they're not like a canned pear, but they are cooked. So that's that step. Thanks. So my job as chef an educator here and culinary historian, is to sort of show you items you may have heard about, and either because they sounded odd or they were a luxury. That's my place to sort of give you a taste of that. Like I mentioned, black walnuts might be something you've never tried. They are similar to English walnuts, but they're stronger, a little more bitter. We had a tree growing up out behind the garage, so I never had a chocolate chip cookie or a pan of brownies that did not have black walnuts in them, not English walnuts. So those are one thing we're going to taste. The other one is, and in that same park, when I do the vinaigrette in a minute, it's most obvious to use olive oil. We couldn't grow that historically on the East Coast. Thomas Jefferson had trouble. He even was introducing sesame as an oil product. So it wasn't until the Spanish got to California that we didn't have to import olive oil. But one of those luxury items you might have seen, and it's a little pricey, is walnut oil. So I'm going to make the vinaigrette from not the olive oil, which would work fine, but with the walnut oil to really kick up the flavor of the walnuts. Maybe even the raspberry vinegar is something that you've never tried. So we're going to include that in the dressing as well. So the easiest way I like to do a vinaigrette is just to put it in a jar. And you see I've got a little bit of raspberry vinegar. Again, that's from the raspberry bushes at the back of the farm. And those are in red wine vinegar because I like to play off the color. I sort of upped it. The raspberries added more redness to the vinegar. Walnut oil you'll see as well, and the classic proportion is 3-to-1 oil to vinegar. I'm a Pennsylvania Dutch boy, so I might use a little more vinegar. I like things tart and zippy. So even potato salad, I might make mine a little more sour than yours. Speaking of the jar, one of the things I like to do is also, this will stay separated if we just let it as this. I like to put in a little mustard. It will keep the ingredients in suspension. It won't really emulsify them like mayonnaise, but it will keep them shakeable and together. Now, here's the little bit of frugalness that the Haynes and the Whisters would approve of. That last little gurgles sticking to the corners of your mustard jars, build your vinaigrette in that next time, right at the end, and shake, shake. So what I would be doing in the jar, I sometimes do 3 or 4 times a year just in my mustard because I don't want to throw that little bit away. So that's a good little trick. So I'm going to put mustard. I could easily have put in garlic, but I've got a lot of flavors. I didn't want to jump it too heavy to cover up the mead and the pears because we've got walnuts and goat cheese and vinegar, and so I didn't want to kick it too hard, but garlic is fine. Salt and pepper are fine. I'm going to add those. I'm going to give it a shot of mustard, and that's it. It doesn't need much. I do use kosher salt. It will probably take more than you might think. And yes, grab a spoon, and we're going to taste it. It is about balance. It isn't just about the proportions, but we're going to taste this at this point. We can always adjust it. And because we're Honey Fest, I'm going to sweeten it with a little bit of our honey from the hives. That should do it. You'll see right away that it sort of stays, once the mustard pulls apart, it will stay cloudy like that. So make a big jar, keep it in the refrigerator. If it has garlic in it, it'll get sharp, but at this point, it's up to you. Herbs, garlic, a different mustard. I will let that sit so you can see that it will stay up. There we are. Hey, I'm back. I do want to remind you what we've already done. We have peeled and cored and poached pears in mead flavored with a little honey. I left those in the syrup overnight to absorb as much flavor as possible. I don't remember if yesterday when we were talking about black walnuts, if I mentioned that these were toasted. So any nut would have worked. Hazelnuts, pecans, almonds. Make sure that you toast those even 8 or 10 minutes in a medium oven. That'll just bring out all those nutty oils. So there's the walnuts. We had the goat cheese. We had made the vinaigrette from raspberry vinegar and the walnut oil. And you saw me in the farm gathering the greens. So let me run through those a little closer here today. I have to admit that our arugula had bolted. It was a warm summer. So this arugula is from the grocery store. This little guy is purslane. You've cursed it in your garden for decades. Purslane. We also have garlic chives that I snipped. You saw me in the garden with the white blossoms. These are the little flat leaves. We have some oak leaf lettuce. There's mint in here, which is easy to recognize. The dark one is either red beet leaves, you can tell by the little stem, or perilla. That's the Italian name for it, and the Latin name, actually. The Japanese call it shiso. So it comes in green and burgundy as well, but that's easy. It's a little bitter, so it really does go with the sweet honey vinaigrette. So those are my greens. A little step on ID. Either go looking and foraging the first time with somebody. We don't want you to get sick by grabbing something you don't know. So identification is important. Pick an unsprayed field and pick a pet-free area. We don't want gathered stuff by the sidewalk. You can figure that out all by yourself. So pet-free sidewalks are not, pet sidewalks are not where to go. And unsprayed fields, Other than that, we're good. I'm going to combine these. We've got Farm Club here today, so they're going to get a treat by not only weeding and farming and harvesting. We're going to taste this later on today. See you in a little bit. Hey kids, we've moved outside from the main house. We're at the edge of the farm, and appropriately we're by our bees. The openings are on the other side, so they're very busy. I'm going to dress the salad that we worked on earlier. You remember our gathered vegetables. I did want to add that when my grandma would gather these things in the backyard, in the garden, in the lawn, she would call it her apron salad because she would gather, she would walk and pick things. So this is sort of an homage to her. This is my grandma's apron salad. I'm going to dress it with the vinaigrette we put together. Don't drown it. There's plenty here. Yes, look at that. It took it all. I'm going to put the pears right in. I'm going to put all of the black walnuts in because they're just yummy. I'm going to go ahead and toss that at this point and then just top it with the goat cheese. If I would put that in initially, it would sort of get creamy and maybe a little cloudy looking. I kind of like the clarity of the salad and the veggies. We're going to get those pears distributed. And then I'm just going to garnish with the goat cheese on top. So, Tessa's here still. I think she has a few words for you as well.
Wow, this looks so good.
Oh, you're just hungry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, before we serve this up to the Home Farm Club participants who are working on the farm right now, I want to give a quick shout out. WIC just received an IMLS grant to expand our Home Farm Club to the Home Farm Foodways project. So right now we meet Wednesday mornings and evenings and invite anyone in the community to come help us work on our home farm, and we divvy up the produce that is harvested at the end of each workshop and send everyone home with some free produce. But next year, in addition to that and expanding the season, we're going to be incorporating a series of workshops like this one that teach you all how to use some of the produce that's grown in the garden and incorporating some of the history in the house. So I hope you stay tuned. If you like this video, keep a lookout for more workshops and more home farm events in the future. So,
Always happy to be in your company. Thank you.
Same.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. You're good friends. Thank you.